Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for helping. It's Ransom here. If you don't know me, my name is Ransom. I'm a radiography fourth year radiography student studying radiography. And apart from my studies in radiography, I'm also a medical writer and also a YouTuber. So today I have an amazing guest speaker for Med Talk Chats. She's a nurse and she's based in the UK. Hey, Mayowa, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello, Ransom. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And hello, everyone. I'm Mayowa Racheal Popoola. I'm a registered nurse in the United Kingdom. And aside being a registered nurse, I'm also a nurse career strategist. So I basically help nurses connect to non-bedside opportunities. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. That was an
Yeah,
amazing introduction, Mayowa. So
thank
yeah,
you.
Mayowa, we have a couple of questions for you to answer. You ready?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. The first question for you is, so tell me, what are the common career opportunities for nurses in the UK? Dr. Stewart.
All right. So, for nurses that are in the UK, in fact, generally, I would say that there is no one way approach to, career progression for nurses, um, whether in the UK or globally. There are over 300 career paths for nurses that can nurses can also take to progress or to work in, right? But for the sake of this video and to help whoever is looking for information or what opportunities they can take in their career, I will just break it down into 4 to 5 categories and then working it down from the basic and then up to going to advanced roles, right? So in the UK, you can start working with in the clinical aspect, right? You can work depending on what unit you're interested in working in. So you can be a staff nurse working in the clinical side, and then you can now work your way upwards within the clinical setting. So you can be a deputy ward manager and then become a ward manager as well. And if within the clinical aspect as well, if you're not interested in working at the bedside, you can choose to also work in other role, right? So you can choose to go into education, you can go to research, you can go into patient safety, quality improvement, and other aspects of nursing, but not necessarily at the bedside, right? And also, you can also work in the community as a district nurse. So if you don't like, being at the bedside, or maybe you're looking for more flexible options, you can consider community aspect of nursing. And if you're not looking at progressing in your career as a nurse, then you can also consider specializing. So remember what I said earlier, right? That there is no one way approach to this. So depending on what your area of interest is, so you can choose to specialize in that field. So let's say, for example, you're interested in specializing in maybe respiratory or cardiology, you can go ahead and then become a certified nurse specialist, right? So you can or be a clinical nurse specialist rather in that area in cardiology or maybe in respiratory. So you can become a specialist in that area. Other than that, you can also consider advanced nurse practitioner role along that line as well. And then you can also consider becoming a nurse consultant in that aspect as well. So depending on your area of interest, what you tend to do, and so you can consider this. But then aside that, you can also consider administrative or managerial role. So in your nursing career, remember I said I'm going to take this from the basic and then work it upward, right? So let's say based on your year of experience or what your interest is, so you can also go on to become maybe a matron, a director of nursing or deputy director of nursing. Or if you're not interested in those IKDA role, you can also consider other management administrative role, but they are still a leadership role within the organization. So like I said, there's no one way approach to this. So depending on what your area of interest is and what you want, then you can consider what opportunities you desire. But this is just a summary of the various career opportunities available for nurses in the United Kingdom.
Hmm,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Mayowa, for talking us there about the common career opportunities for nurses in the UK.
Yeah.
And I believe that nurses out there that are based in the UK that are a little bit confused about career opportunities as a nurse. I believe that Mayo has really broken down the basics for you, so it's left for you
Yeah.
to go for the passion, go for a passion, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for talking us through about that, Mayowa. So, let's proceed to the next question for you. All right, so the next question for you is, so tell me, how can nurses leverage their clinical experiences when transitioning to non-bedside roles? Talk us through.
For nurses, before I go into answering that question, I feel like laying some foundation, right? Because there's a lot of opinions these days about nurses working beyond the bedside. But I'll say that there are different reasons why nurses move from the bedside to working in non-clinical roles, right? A lot of nurses might not be able to cope with the burnout and stress that is within the bedside aspect. So they want something that will give them that option of working without being burnt out or being stressed. And some also might, maybe for one reason or the other, might not be able to cope with the physical demand of the job, and they want to change. Some want more flexibility, work-life balance, increased pay, career progression, and a lot of other reasons. So nurses make a move from the bedside for one reason or the other, right? So, and in as much as they want to move beyond the bedside, there are also different aspects they can work in, right? So as a nurse, you can consider, like I mentioned earlier, right, you can go into education, the clinical aspect of healthcare, right? And then without actually moving out of the healthcare field. So you are away from the bedside, but you're still within the clinical aspect of healthcare. So you can go into education, you can go into research, quality improvement, patient safety, and all the other aspects of clinical aspect. And then as a nurse, you can also go into, the non-clinical aspect, which is still within the healthcare field, right? So maybe you're working as a let me say project manager now, or you're working in IT roles or in one tech role or the other, or in pharmaceutical industries. There are lots of role coaching and other stuff like that, right? So now coming out to work how can nurses leverage right on their clinical experience to now work in these non-bedside roles. I'll say that this is not something that will happen in a day, right? A lot of nurses actually make a mistake of thinking, oh yes, they want to move, and then think, oh, then they can now start moving, and then a lot of people then set themselves up for failure in that aspect. So as a nurse, if you're trying to move beyond the bedside, what can you do, right? um to be able to move to that aspect. So you can, number one, do a self-assessment. So identify what your strength is, what skills you possess, your values, your interests, and why you are even making a move. Remember, I mentioned that there's so many reasons nurses want to move beyond the bedside. So when you find out why, maybe for example, why you want to move, then it guides you on the next step to take in your transition journey. And then also finding out the skills and interest, your skill rather, we also be able to help you find out what is missing, and then what you need to do to be able to build up on the gaps you have, and then successfully transition into that non-bedside role, right? So when you need to find out that, so you also need to find out what aspect you love and enjoy, and then with that new role that you're going to really offer you the flexibility or the reason why you're moving from the bedside to that particular role, so you also don't end up being in the same situation that you're trying to move out from, right? Again, I also highlight that identifying your skills and strengths will also help you to be able to determine what role you can fit into, and if there is a need for you to build upon the skills you have to be able to successfully work in the new role, right? So that's number one thing you need to do if you're trying to leverage on your clinical experience as a nurse. Then secondly, I will also say that you will also need to create a career goal, right? So those goals should align with your long-term career goals as well. So let's say, for example, you intend to move into a nurse research role now, right? So you need to be able to identify the steps you're going to take to become a clinical nurse researcher, right? So you just can't expect that you're going to move from you working in the clinical aspect into that if you don't even have, let's say, for example, a background research experience or maybe a certification in that aspect. So when you identify your career goals, then you work your way up. So you can decide to go for additional certifications if you don't have one. Then you can also decide to gain some experiences in that particular area. Maybe, for example, volunteer in your maybe local organization or within your community if there is a research thing going on in that aspect, right? So what this does for you is when you now show up to apply for any of these roles, it gives you a leverage, right? So because you're now putting your best foot forward. So just imagine someone coming without a certification in nursing research, without any background experience, and another candidate coming with this and even more. Who do you think the recruiter will consider, right? So they will definitely consider the person with all these extra things, right? So you need to be able to identify what your goals are and then work your way up. So what do you need to be able to achieve that goal, and then give yourself timeline. So let's say, for example, in the first 1 to 3 months, I'm going to work on getting an extra certification in nursing research, and then in the next 3 to 6 months, I also work on building my experience, maybe volunteering or shadowing experience, to be able to have something to show that along that line. And then let's say within the next 6 to 8 months, then I'm going to see myself working in this particular role. So that's also another thing to consider. Then you can also consider research. So if you're not sure what role you want to go into, right, so you can reach more about various options available for you as a nurse. So you can highlight the top 3 to 5 area that you love, that you would really love to work in, right? Highlight them and then start ticking the box. Okay, if I really need to choose which would be my top 3, and then you can now start narrowing it down. And then I always suggest something to people whenever I also work with nurses in this aspect. So I always say that, let's say you're not really sure about what you want to do, you can consider volunteering in any of these top 3 roles to see what you really want to do, right? And then from your volunteering experience or maybe your shadowing experience, you can then now try to rule out what area you think you might not want to work in at that particular point. Then you can, like I mentioned earlier, what additional certification or qualification do you need? There are some roles that you can use just your basic maybe nursing degree or diploma, and then you can still be able to work in those roles. But there are some roles that you need additional qualification or certification, right, to be able to work. So let's say, for example, you want to work as a clinical stroke specialist nurse, right? For example, you will need an extra certification or a qualification in stroke, care and every other thing to be able to work in that particular role, right? So you also then need, so do I need an extra, or is there requirements for anything extra for me to be able to work in this role? And then you can never override the place of what's it called now, mentorship, right? Because when you get the right mentors, they'll be able to point you on the right path to take to be able to work in this role. And then finally, you also need to network. So network with people. There are lots of ways you can go about that, and I'll be addressing that later on so that I don't drag this for long.
Amazing, Nurse Mayowa. That was an amazing answer to that question, and I believe that nurses out there, you know, learned one or two things from what you just said about leveraging, their clinical experiences when transitioning to non-bedside roles. Thank you so much for pointing out all these amazing leverages and strategies and techniques as well for nurses to, leverage, their clinical experiences, while transitioning to non-bedside roles. So that precedes, me to move over to the next question for you. Um, So Mayo, could you tell us what skills or qualifications are particularly valuable for nurses looking to change careers outside of traditional bedside settings? So what do you have to say about that?
Okay, so I'll say that again, there's still no one way approach to this, right? So if you've been following my line of conversation from when we started this, um, you know, video, right? So I mentioned something that there are lots of pathway for career progression in nursing, whether you want to work either at the bedside or outside the bedside. So, so you can't just say, oh, this is what like there's no one way approach. That's what I mean to say, right? But one thing, like I mentioned earlier, you can that can help you is find out where you want to work in, right? So when you find out where you want to work in, or your interest, or whatever it is, whatever you want to do is, then you can now find out what skills and certification is required to be able to work in this particular role. So I also give an example again. So let's say, for example, you're interested in working as a nurse informatician, right, or a healthcare informatician, right? So what do you need to be able to work in this role? What skills do you need? What qualifications do you need? Right. So that is how you need to approach any thing you want to do outside the bedside. But just for the sake of those that might just need maybe one idea or two, I'm going to just list out few qualifications or certifications that you need to be able to work beyond the bedside, and also few skills you need as well. So project management is always top of the list. In fact, I believe that if you have a certification in project management, you can help you to be able to work in a multiple roles, right? So even if you're not sure where you want to go, but when you have that certification, you can be able to now put yourself forward and then see what you can do. Maybe, for example, research, clinical project management, and others like that. Then you can consider global clinical practice for nurses who are interested in nursing research. That's also a place to start. And then you can also consider patient safety, quality improvement certification. You can also consider infection prevention and control, and organization and leadership, certifications. Those will also help as well. And then remember, I said something, right, that if you're specializing in an aspect of nursing or maybe in healthcare, you also need an extra certification. So let's say, for example, you want to become an advanced nurse practitioner, just all this management or what's it called, project management certification will not get you those roles, right? So you need to go back to school, do your masters, and then depending on what requirements it is in your region, that being that sorry about that. All right. So yeah. So as I was saying, depending on what the requirements you need in, or it is needed in your region, right? You that will determine what extra qualification you need to do, or you need to have, right? So and then if maybe, for example, if you're interested in corporate side of nursing, you can consider getting a coaching certification. Again, remember, there's no one way approach to this. So depending on where you want to work in or where you see yourself, this will determine the kind of certification or qualification that you need. So now let's say you're just looking for skills, like you need to be able to fit into these roles. There are lots of transferable skills you have as a nurse that you can now apply to working beyond the bedside. So let's say, for example, communication, effective communication, teamwork, team spirit, collaboration, right? Because all these they are basic things you do as a nurse, right? You communicate with patients, you communicate with your team members, you collaborate with them, other multidisciplinary what's it called now, professionals, right? So you are doing all this as a nurse, which is also something that you can transfer to working in non-bedside roles. Then you can also add analytical skills if you're considering maybe research or data analysis. I already mentioned communication, leadership skills, and a lot of other skills. So again, I will also highlight, remember, depending on where you see yourself, this will determine the kind of skills you'll be able to highlight for them. Yeah.
You know, I love that last statement. In everything, in summarization of whatever you just said now, determines on or depends on the last statement. In all kinds of opportunity or roles you see yourself, on as a nurse, a practitioner, it actually depends what kind of roles you're working. Also depends on the skills and qualification. So
Yeah.
in everything Nurse Mayowa said, you just have to know where exactly you're at as a nurse, what passion, what field in nursing, specialization nursing suits you, that you really love, you have passion for it. So that drives you to knowing the necessary qualifications, the necessary skills to acquire in order to, be fruitful in that role. So thank you so much, Nurse Manoa, for talking us through about that. So let's proceed to the next question. All right, can you describe any successful case studies or examples, of nurses who have made this transition effectively? Talk us through.
Well, when I was actually thinking about this, I was like, there are lots of nurses. In fact, when I decided to, go into this niche, coaching nurses to be able to transition beyond the bedside, I started making research about nurses that are in this particular role. And I realized that, in fact, there are lots of nurses in this role. So streamlining these nurses doesn't mean one is the best or the other, but these are people that I follow their work closely, and I see what they do online as well. And if you go on Google, for example, and search for, corporate nurses or something related to this, you see a lot of case studies. But the few nurses that I know, number one person is Nurse Coach Ola, and her full name is Olayinka Aremu, right? So she's a nurse, and then she's an assistant professor, a lecturer, a career coach and mentor, and she's also a global nurse leader. So this she has walked away from being a working at the bedside to now lecturing and being an assistant professor. And then aside that, we also have Rebecca Love, and on LinkedIn, she's also a global nurse leader and a top nursing voice on LinkedIn as well. So she's a nurse, she's an innovator, she's an author, she's a speaker as well. So her role has evolved beyond the bedside to working in this role. And then we also have Josiah Okesola. She is also a nurse as well, and one of the, in fact, all these people that I mentioned it, they are the some of the nurses I really admire and kind of give me the motivation with whatever it is that I do, and of course my own career growth as well. So he's also an award winning nurse innovator, and he's also a tech startup builder. So, and he's a nurse. So that's also something I needed to highlight as well. And there's also another person, Abimpi. She's also a nurse career strategist, and she's a clinical project manager, right? So all these, like I mentioned earlier, these nurses are the few examples I just want to highlight, but there are lots of nurses who are now working beyond the bedside.
Wow, I literally knew everybody you just mentioned.
Also,
So that's why I really concurred with what you just said. Alayinka nurse, Anayika, she's based in Ireland, right?
yes, yeah,
And she's doing incredibly well, in terms of her teaching and everything. I'm also working on a project with her sometime. I'm gonna,
oh,
just trying to work on a project with her because she's an
yeah,
amazing person. She has really
yes,
received a lot of awards. She has really
yes,
shut down Ireland in terms of nursing, and she
nothing,
has
yeah,
really pushed. She has really coached with a lot of people, and transitioning from, working in the bedside, role as a nurse into non-bedside roles. She's doing incredibly well. In terms of
Yes,
Rebecca, she's one of the top voices on LinkedIn, and
yes.
yeah, we've connected, and also trying to like work on a project with her very soon, and others as well. So thank you so much for pointing all these amazing successful case studies, of nurses, that have, made it with this transitioning effectively. And I
Mm,
know that the audience now really, if you're also willing to connect with all these people, they are all on LinkedIn,
LinkedIn,
and their
exactly.
names will be added. Their names will be also be added on the YouTube description
Yeah.
below as well if you're wanting to, reach out to them as well. And so thank you so much, Nurse Mayowa, for talking to Stereo about that. So that draws me to the next question for you. So what are the main challenges nurses face when moving away from bedside roles, and how can they overcome them? Talk us through.
Well, nurses face a lot of challenges, and I think the number one challenge they face is fear and uncertainty, right? Because this is something new for them. A lot of nurses are now like, some have spent years working at the bedside, and now they're now looking at transitioning to working beyond the bedside. So there's a lot of fear and uncertainty that comes with making that move, because it's a major move for them. So they are afraid, and then they're not sure if this is the right step for them to take. Some are not even sure of what they will meet in that new role. Some are, uncertain about if they will be able to deliver at their optimum level in that particular role as well. And then some will also be like, oh, what if I flop, or maybe what if I do something that will actually make them want to just say they don't need me anymore. So there are lots of things that actually contribute to fear and uncertainty, but that's number one thing. Barrier to transitioning beyond the bedside. And secondly, there's also something that we call professional identity crisis, right? So like I mentioned earlier, most of these nurses, they've been at the bedside all their lives, right? So now, moving from the bedside to working, let's say for example you're working in a tech role, is a major leap, right? So you are not even taking care of patient now. Although whatever it is you're doing is still related to patient care, but it's not like you're not giving a direct patient care to patient, right? So yes, so this can be also be something that will contribute to a professional identity crisis, because these nurses, they found themselves working in the bedside all their work, and the a lot, some of them derive meaning from working and taking care of patients, right? So now moving beyond that, we kind of help now give them a form of, I'll say a question mark. Where did they now get that meaning from? So let me put it that way, right? So it now depends on what they now find meaning from. So if you're, for example, a nurse find meaning from, working or taking care of patient directly, then it will be a great struggle for that nurse to be able to, fit into the new role. And then some also have now, maybe they need to now work in a role that now align with their core values, right, as a person, as an individual. So this can also be a great struggle for them as well. And another thing is skill gaps and knowledge. So remember, I highlighted earlier that if you're seeking to move beyond the bedside, you might need to be able to determine what skills or what knowledge you need to be able to work in this particular role, right? So let's say, for example, you realize that you don't have what it takes to work in that role. It can create a form of fear as well, and and a form of let me say barrier for you to be able to seamlessly transition into that particular role. Then there's also the work culture. So moving from working within the bedside to now working in corporate roles, also the culture is different, right? So let's say, for example, you're working in let me say research now again, for example, maybe you're working in what can I give, again, tech or pharmaceutical industries. So this is the working culture in those areas will be, of course, entirely different from where you're working within the hospital. So, and then again, what their own key performance indicator would be will also be different from what the bedside own would be as well. So this can also be a challenge for nurses. And then also financial implications, right? So in as much as some of these will bring higher financial return for nurses in the long run, some might need to make some sacrifices in the short term, right? So because let's for example, it's something you're not used to, and you need to now make a total move from what you are used to, and then maybe you need to now work your way from the bottom of the ladder upward, right? So your pay might actually reduce because of that. So that can also be a great struggle for nurses, right? So how can they now overcome these barriers? And if before I go into how they can overcome it, these are just like some of the major barriers nurses face. There are lots of other barriers, right? So how can they now overcome this barrier, right? So remember I mentioned fear and uncertainty as the number one barrier. So there's this thing saying that I normally say that whatever it is you want to do, do it afraid, and don't be crippled by fear as well, because every change, every move comes with fear, comes with uncertainty, right? So but if you now decide to let this stop you, then you realize that you'll still be in that particular place, and in years to come, you still find yourself in that particular position. But once you've identified why you want to move, and what it is that you intend to achieve with making that particular transition, let it be what will guide you on that particular journey. And then speak to people, right? So when you speak to people that have walked that path, or maybe people that are now working in that particular role, you see yourself, you'll be able to identify what their challenges were, what their struggles were, and whatever tips they can give you to be able to successfully move from where you are now to your new role. And then also, um, like, yeah, speak to people, network with people, make your own research, consider what it is that you need, right, to be able to work effectively in that role, and see if it is something that it is a risk you are willing to take. But if you have a valid reason for saying you want to move from a particular role to another role, as long as you've done your research and you've seen people working in and you've talked to those people, right, I would say that do not let fear and uncertainty cripple you from making that move. So, and then going to professional identity crisis, um, to be able to overcome that, I would say identify what it is that gives you meaning, and what your core values are. So if you're a nurse that you realize that working directly with patients is what gives you a sense of meaning, if you find yourself working in a corporate role, let's say, for example, in a tech role, that you're not directly involved with patient, you might have a lot of struggle or identity crisis. So before making that major move, well, you can consider doing a form of I'm trying to look for the word now. So you don't make the move totally. So let's say, for example, you can start from the clinical aspect. There's still tech roles within the hospital or within the healthcare organizations that you can do as a nurse without moving out totally outside the hospital. So you can start from there. So you can do a form of bridge. So you start from that part, see how it feels, how you feel working in that room, and you see if you're now ready to move in beyond, totally outside the bedside. So that's one thing you can do, right? So you can start from somewhere and then take it a step at a time. There's a particular word I'm looking for, but it's not coming to my head at the moment. But I hope I've been able to, yeah, just paint a picture of what it is you need to do. So, and then also volunteer, you can also choose to volunteer in these roles. So let's say, for example, you have a role you want to do, maybe you're now in this particular role, you can now try volunteering again, maybe with taking care of patient at the bedside, or you can do your maybe extra shifts in that particular area you love working in. That's also something. So you don't necessarily leave the bedside totally, and then but you are still working where you intend to work. So again, remember what is your core values, what gives you meaning. This will be able to guide you on what you need to do. Then if you have a skill gap and knowledge, I've spoken in detail about this earlier. So you just need to do the same thing. Get yourself certified, get yourself qualified, work on building your skills, and that will also help you to be able to successfully transition into your new role. And then depending on the work culture and everything, like I said, it's something you're not used to, but you get used to it over time. But just make sure that whatever place you're going to is not a toxic environment, right? So you just need to make sure it's not a toxic, so you're not jumping from fire pan to fire in that regard, right? So make your due research and then see what the work culture is and how they're willing to help you develop yourself and then adapt seamlessly into your new role. And then, of course, financial implication, make your research again, see if you are willing to make that, take that risk to start your journey, knowing that it's just temporary, it's not something that will be like that for a long period of time. So determine what kind of risk you're willing to take and then work it
Yeah,
from there. Yeah.
amazing. I believe that nurses out there are learning one or two things from you because I think you pointed out the main challenges because there are thousands of them, thousands
Yes.
of challenges nurses face on a daily basis, working or moving away from, bedside roles.
Yeah.
And, thank you so much as well sharing how they can as well overcome them. And I believe that nurses out there, they're going to watch this video are really enlightened based on that. So, Mayowa, you've been an amazing guest speaker thus far,
Yeah.
and I know that the audience are really enlightened, the
Yeah.
more. So, we have the last question for you. So, how can nurses stay current with job openings and career development opportunities in areas other than the bedside roles? Talk us through.
Well, for that, the world is now more of tech and internet oriented. So I feel like is it makes it more easy. Yes, it's not feel. I think that's just the fact. It makes it more easy for nurses to not get connected to various opportunities or yes, various opportunities that are available for them beyond the bedside. So if you're looking at working beyond the bedside to be able to stay updated, you can consider joining various professional organizations, right? So most of these organizations, they are now more innovative in their approach to career development for nurses. So they know that the world is evolving and as well as nursing career as well. So they are now bringing discussions like this to help nurses seamlessly transition to non-bedside roles. So if you join your profession, depending on your region. So, for example, here in the United Kingdom, we have the RCN, which is the Royal College of Nursing, right? So, and they have a lot of resources related to moving beyond the bedside. So it's one of the things you can explore if you're looking to at moving beyond the bedside. And we have American Nurses Association if you are in the United States. And again, depending on what country you are, there are different organizations you can join to be able to leverage on this opportunity. Then there are also online communities, right? You can join as well. We have Sunsil as well, and a lot of organization communities online, particularly on LinkedIn. If you're a professional nurse, in fact, you should not sleep on building a personal brand and then connecting with other nurses on LinkedIn, because there's a lot of resources, valuable network you can get from being on LinkedIn, right? So that's one way to go about it. Then you can beyond joining this community, there are some of this community that are really established. Right, I mentioned Sunsil earlier. Right, they are really established. It's a really established community. Then there are some that they are just groups. Small groups, but you can still get valuable resources from that. In fact, I have a community I recently started building, which is also related to something like this, where nurses are, and then we share updates and lots of resources for them as well. And Yes, community, and then you can to stay updated again. I mentioned LinkedIn. That's your sure bet. And we have also other platform, Indeed, other nursing job like Flexi Job, and I wrote some down. Let's say look for Zebra, FamilyWeb.jobs, a lot of nursing. But if you go online, you get all these nursing jobs, and Google as well. If you go on Google and search for a particular role, you'll be able to get a lot of updates, but just make sure that you use relevant keywords, industry keywords, so that you get valuable results from Google when you're doing that. And yes, you so build a personal brand, leverage on building your own personal brand. There are lots of nurses that have been able to get a lot of opportunities from having a personal brand, for example, on LinkedIn or maybe other social media platforms. Yeah, so these are the various ways you can stay updated and to connect to opportunities beyond the bedside.
Amazing, amazing. Nurse Mayowa, we've come to the end of the session. Um, we really want to thank you for, offering your narrative and these amazing and intriguing questions. And I believe that in a nutshell, the audience are really enlightened based on your own initiative and narrative and those incredible questions. So before we wrap up the session, what are your last words for the audience?
Before I say my last word, let me just again appreciate you for this incredible opportunity. I do not take it for granted, and I believe this is a resource a lot of nurses will find useful to guide them, particularly if they are looking at making the move from the bedside to working in non-traditional nursing roles. So my last words, right? So I would say whatever it is you tend to do, know your why. That is, in fact, I'm a fervent preacher of that. When you know the reason why you're doing something, it guides you, and then whatever it is that happens in that journey, that will give you a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning, and also a push to keep going, because you have naysayers, you will have things coming up at you through that journey, but knowing the reason why you're moving will help you build resilience and also stay committed to that cause. So know your why. Don't be crippled by change. Make that move. Change is inevitable, but do not let fear stop you. And then network with people. Join organization, connect with people. You never can tell what opportunities you get from that. And don't underestimate the place of going for professional events as well. So I think these are the few things I would say for nurses who are seeking to move beyond the bedside.
All right, we've come to the end of the session. If you love this content, do it to subscribe, very important, and do well to watch to the end of the session because there are a lot of resources for you who are nurses out there. They're gonna watch this video. So also comment as well if you have questions. If you want to reach out to Mayowa on LinkedIn, especially. All the details will be on the YouTube description below as well. And do well to comment if you have questions and also share to your network as well. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Nurse Mayo.
Thank you so
Amazing.
much, Ransom, for